What's up, sports fans? This is the Lucas Ross Sports Channel. It is time to give you my official college football picks and predictions as we head into week number 5 of the 2024 college football season. Before I get into these predictions here for week 5, looking back to my predictions from last week in week number 4, my record was officially 5-5, so I went pretty even at 50-50. So my record again was 5-5, and my overall record throughout this college football season so far is 24-17. That is what my record is throughout these predictions for game picks and predictions for the season so far. Now we head into week 5. We got a bunch of good matchups. We got week 5 starting up pretty much tomorrow, which I'll get to the game that's coming up for you tomorrow here in just a moment. But let's go ahead and get into my game picks and predictions here for week number 5 of the 2024 college football season. Again, I picked out 10 of the biggest games of the weekend, and I'm going to give you score predictions, even though score predictions don't really matter. I'm just picking a team who I think is going to win this game. So let's go ahead and get right into it here, and we'll start here with a Friday night game. Virginia Tech versus Miami. This game will be at 7:30 Eastern Time on ESPN. Miami favored by 19.5 points in this one, and the over-and-under is at 54.5. Miami has looked like one of the best teams in the country so far, maybe besides Texas. I should say Miami's been the best team in the ACC so far, and then also the most talented team as well. They're ranked number 7 in the AP poll. I think after 4 weeks, this Miami team is definitely for real. They're definitely really different compared to the last couple years under Mario Cristobal. On the other side, Virginia Tech comes in at 2-2. They've been a pretty disappointing team so far. This is a team that I really had high expectations for going into the offseason with all those returning players coming back. But, when you add experience coming back, to your roster and everything, sometimes an experienced team really cannot live up to the expectations, and that's what Virginia Tech has done so far this year. They're coming off a loss to Rutgers last week. I just don't really think this is going to be a close game whatsoever. Miami definitely a clearly better team here and a very talented team as well. But you never know. These weeknight games, we probably could see some upsets happen. It's happened before. It's happened, all the time in college football history. Not this time, though. I think Miami, in their first official game, they know how serious they have to be in these first, official games here in the ACC. So with that being said, I think Miami blows out Virginia Tech here, 35-14. I think Virginia Tech does score a couple of touchdowns in this game, but it definitely will not be enough to pull off the upset. So I got the Hurricanes winning this one 35-14. And again, this game will be at 7:30 Eastern Time coming up tomorrow night on ESPN. Next up, we go to the Saturday games now. Kentucky versus Ole Miss. This game will be at noon Eastern Time on ABC. Rebels favored by 17.5, and the over-and-under is at 53.5. This is kind of the first real test here for Ole Miss. They haven't really had a really tough competition against a really good opponent. They're taking on a Kentucky team that's pretty average. Yes, they come in at 2-2. They may be a bad team. I don't really think they're a bad team. I think this is a pretty average Kentucky team. They've had a really tough schedule to start out the year. Lost to Georgia a couple weeks ago and then lost to South Carolina in week number 2. Yeah, they got blown out in that game. I just feel like Kentucky was overlooking South Carolina and they were really focused on that Georgia game. Now they're heading on the road here for the first time this season, and that's a very tough place to play. Ole Miss, I think, is pretty solid on the offensive side of the football, very explosive. Jackson Dart looking like one of the best quarterbacks in the SEC right now. 16 touchdown passes, definitely a Heisman candidate. But this will be a really tough defense that they'll go up against. But I think Kentucky really doesn't have the defense to stop Ole Miss's offense from scoring a lot of points. I think Kentucky, the game strategy for them in this game will definitely try to run the football. I don't think it will be enough, though. I think Ole Miss clearly is a better team here. And again, Kentucky has been pretty average, and we'll see how good this Ole Miss defense is coming up this weekend, if they have changed or not. And we'll see if this Ole Miss defense is a little bit different compared to the first few years that Lane Kiffin's been here. But I think Ole Miss scores a lot here in this one, but I think Kentucky does score here as well. I think all their points maybe come in the second half, but I got Ole Miss winning this one 34-20. So yeah, a 14-point win here for Ole Miss. I don't really think they cover that spread, but they do win by double digits by 14 points. So I got Ole Miss winning this one 34-20. Next up, we got Oklahoma State versus Kansas State in the Big 12. This game will be at noon Eastern Time on ESPN. Kansas State favored by 4.5, and the over and under is at 54.5. Both of these teams are pretty similar. They come in with identical 3-1 records. They're both ranked outside the top 20, or I should say Oklahoma State's just inside that top 20. The Wildcats, though, at number 23. Both of these teams are coming off losses last week. How did they recover and bounce back after their losses? Oklahoma State lost 22-19 to Utah, and then Kansas State got blown out by BYU. BYU's been a really big surprise team so far. The Wildcats are favored in this game, which is kind of really shocking for a team that is coming off that blowout loss. 38-9 loss to BYU. Yeah, that kind of really shocks me, but I think the reason why the Wildcats are favored here is because of the home field advantage. I think both of these teams will come out really fired up. I think this is a game that probably decides who has the second best chance to make it to the Big 12 championship, and then also probably meet Utah maybe in a rematch. I don't know if Kansas State or Utah meet each other in the regular season, but Oklahoma State does in the regular season. That, of course, happened last weekend. You know, I've been liking this Oklahoma State team a little bit more than Kansas State based off of what happened from last week. I think Oklahoma State looks like a better team than Kansas State, if I'm not mistaken. So with that being said, this game is a back-and-forth game. It's a low-scoring type game. I think a turnover probably changes the difference, but I do trust Oklahoma State a little bit more. I also trust Alan Bowman a little bit more to make the explosive plays, and I think Oklahoma State wins it. Again, a turnover probably changes the difference, and maybe a game-winning field goal probably happens, but I got Oklahoma State winning on the road at Kansas State here, 24-21. So I think this is a upset here by Oklahoma State because they do, they're like the underdog in this game by 4.5 points. So again, I'm going to go with Oklahoma State here in this one, 24-21. Next up, we got another Big 12 game, BYU versus Baylor at noon Eastern time on Fox Sports 1. How about this, though? Baylor is favored by 3.5 when BYU is the ranked team, and they're undefeated at 4-0. They've been really impressive so far in the first 4 weeks, and the over and under is at 45.5, so not expecting a lot of points to be scored in this one. And I tell you what, Baylor is coming off that loss to Colorado last week in overtime. Yeah, that was a heartbreaking loss. You know, Baylor's going to come out really fired up in this one because BYU is ranked at number 22, just inside that top 25 poll. BYU, though, this is a really good team, a really solid team. Not saying they're a great team or anything like that. They're pretty solid, and they are like that dark horse team in the Big 12, just based off of what I've seen so far in the first 4 weeks of the season. They also got a win over a pretty good SMU team. So, yeah, this BYU team has played a tough schedule so far, and they're sitting there at 4-0. I think Baylor does have a chance to pull off the upset here. It will be a close game, but I just like this BYU team a lot. I think they're on momentum after that win over Kansas State. They get off to a pretty slow start, but I think the Cougars win this one. They go on the road and beat Baylor here. Baylor's a pretty average team. I'm not saying Baylor's really that bad of a team. They're just pretty average. They're sitting there at 2-2. And when I say average, these goes for all the teams here that are sitting at 2-2 on the season so far. But again, BYU and Baylor, I got BYU winning this one 27-21 right here in the Big 12 Conference, even though Baylor is favored by 3.5. Again, that spread really shocks me there, that Baylor is favored in this one. I think it's just because of the home field advantage, and it's probably an even matchup. Next up, we got Wisconsin versus USC, a Big Ten matchup here, 3:30 Eastern time. This will be the CBS 3:30 game. USC favored by 15.5. Wisconsin, coming out of a bye week a couple weeks ago, lost to Alabama. Tyler Van Dyke, of course, out for the rest of the year. That's going to be a huge loss here for this Wisconsin team. How do they bounce back after the loss to Alabama a couple weeks ago? They had some time to prepare here for this USC team. USC, we don't know a ton about them just yet. They have a win over LSU. How do they bounce back after a loss to Michigan from last weekend? Are they all beat up? Do they come out really sloppy in this game, and it could be a low-scoring type game? I really don't think so. I don't think Wisconsin's really all that good this year. And, Tyler Van Dyke, of course, the injury does hurt the Badgers in this one. If Tyler Van Dyke was playing in this game, I think I would expect Wisconsin to come out really fired up in this one, and especially after a bye week, they really come out really competitive, and also they have a chance to pull off the upset. But without him, I think USC wins this one. I don't think it's a really big blowout, but I think USC wins this one by a couple of touchdowns. They win this one 31-17. So I got USC bouncing back here after the loss to Michigan from last week, and Wisconsin does lose teams here. I just don't think they're going to be a really good team this year without Tyler Van Dyke, of course, at quarterback. And I just think that offense is not going to be the same without him. So I got USC winning this one 31-17. Next up, we got Louisville versus Notre Dame, 3:30 Eastern time on Peacock. So, yeah, Peacock, you can't really watch this game. Notre Dame favored by 6 points, and the over and under is at 45.5. Notre Dame coming off that little bit of a sloppy performance against Miami of Ohio in the first half. They ended up pulling away in the second half and winning it like 31-17. Was Notre Dame actually looking ahead there against Miami of Ohio and focusing on this Louisville team? I don't know. It's kind of hard to tell. The Fighting Irish, I think, are a pretty good team. Not a great team, though, just because of, the loss to Northern Illinois in week number 2. And then also the, competitiveness against, like, Texas A&M. They beat them in week 1, and then they beat, Purdue in a blowout there. That was the best offensive performance that they've had so far. On the other side, Louisville, we don't really know how good this team just yet is. We're going to see how good this team is coming up this weekend. They're sitting there at 3-0, coming off a win against Georgia Tech in a physical game, 31-19. I think this is a close game. This is a revenge game here for the Fighting Irish, of course, from last year. Louisville beat Notre Dame at their home place. I think Notre Dame gets revenge on this Louisville team. I think they'll run the football in this game. I think it's a shootout, though. Maybe not like a shootout, but I think Notre Dame scores 30 points in this one, and I think the Fighting Irish get the win here, 31-24. And again, they get that revenge here on Louisville from last year. And again, I just don't really know how good this Louisville team is. They've only played 3 games. Yes, they beat Georgia Tech from last weekend, but this will be their first real test. They're playing on the road for the first time as well, and this will be the first kind of real test for Notre Dame ever since that Texas A&M game in week number 1. But I got the Fighting Irish here getting the win here, 31-24, and getting revenge on the Cardinals from last year's game. Next up, we got Oklahoma versus Auburn, 3:30 Eastern time on ABC. Oklahoma favored by 2.5 points, and the over-and-under is at 45.5. Oklahoma, how did they bounce back after a loss to Tennessee? The offense definitely has to get things going. This is a must-win here for the Sooners in order to kind of make it to a bowl game at least. Same thing for Auburn. Both of these teams are coming off losses last weekend. You look at Oklahoma, lost to Tennessee, of course, from last weekend. I thought the defense played pretty well for the Sooners, but again, the offense just really struggled to get things going. And then for Auburn, it's been a really slow start to second-year head coach Hugh Freeze. This Auburn team, I think, is not really that good of a team just based off of what I've seen. They lost, a couple of home games to Arkansas and then, of course, Cal in the non-conference. So, yeah, this Auburn team, I'm not saying they're a bad team. They're just pretty average. We'll see if they can bounce back here against Oklahoma, but I tell you what, just based off of how the first 4 weeks have gone, I like Oklahoma a lot better than this Auburn team, and based off of that, I think the Sooners go on the road at Jordan-Hare. Again, when it comes to like these games for Auburn at home, they've been really struggling against some of these Power 4 teams. They struggled against Cal, and they struggled against Arkansas from last week, so with those struggles continuing here for the Tigers, I'm actually going to go with Oklahoma here to pull off maybe a huge upset. On the road at Jordan-Hare, 17-13, and I think they get their first win here in the SEC. I don't really feel confident with this prediction, but I'm going to go with it anyway. But I got Oklahoma winning this one 17-13 on the road here at Jordan-Hare in a low-scoring type game. A turnover probably changes the difference. And I think Oklahoma is the defense that forces the turnover when Auburn's trying to get a game-winning touchdown on the drive. But again, that's what I'm going to go with here. Oklahoma wins this one 17-13. Next up, we stay in the SEC, Arkansas versus Texas A&M. 3:30 Eastern time on ESPN. Texas A&M favored by 4. Another great SEC matchup here. Both of these teams also pretty much identical records and also pretty similar teams that have how the first 4 weeks have gone. Arkansas has been pretty explosive, though, on the offensive side of the football. The defense, though, is going to get better here for Arkansas. It's going to get better and better as the season goes along. Texas A&M is at number 24 in the AP poll. Texas A&M has that loss to Notre Dame in week number 1. They're coming off a win against Bowling Green, a really good Bowling Green team. And Texas A&M really struggled in that game. So I feel like Texas A&M maybe was overlooking Bowling Green and probably looking ahead to this Arkansas team. Arkansas has been a pretty solid team so far, and this game, of course, is in Arlington. It's in a neutral site venue. So, yeah, this is a tough one to call. I've been really back and forth on this game. I think both of these teams are pretty even, but based off of what I've seen so far in the first 4 weeks, I've kind of liked this Arkansas team a little bit more. I think this game is kind of like a shootout. It probably could go either way. A turnover can probably change the difference as well. And I like Arkansas in this one. They're coming off that win against Auburn from last week, and I just think they have some momentum going into this game. And also they had a close loss against Oklahoma State in double overtime back in that game on week number 2. So that tells me that Arkansas is definitely for real. They come out really fired up in this one, and they beat Texas A&M 31-27. They pull off another big upset here for the second straight week in a row. And I also don't really feel confident with this prediction, just like Oklahoma and Auburn in the game as well, but I'm going to go with it anyway. Arkansas beats Texas A&M 31-27. And then we got the big game coming up here, Georgia and Alabama, 7:30 Eastern time on ABC. Georgia favored by 2 points, and the over and under is at 48.5. Both of these teams ranked in the top 5. College Game Day, of course, going to be down here for this one. Georgia comes in at 3-0 coming out of a bye week. Same thing for Alabama. They come in with a record of 3-0 coming out of a bye week as well. Georgia and Alabama rematch from the SEC Championship. Georgia, how did they bounce back after a flat performance against Kentucky a couple weeks ago, only winning that one like 31-12? Alabama's coming off that big win against Wisconsin, so you feel like Alabama definitely has an advantage here, but Georgia definitely has a more talented roster than Alabama. I think the game plan for Georgia in this game is definitely going to make the stops on the defensive side of the football. It's definitely going to come down to Georgia's defense. I think the offense, will probably try to run the football in this game. For Alabama, it's going to come down to their defense as well to stop that Georgia offense. The secondary is going to have to really guard these wide receivers here for Georgia. But, this is a tough one to call. I've been really back and forth on this game. In the preseason, I did pick Georgia to beat Alabama on the road. And I'm still going to go with this pick here. I think Georgia goes on the road at Tuscaloosa and beats Alabama here in a close one. Again, it's a low-scoring type game, 28-24. I think a turnover probably changes the difference. Maybe a late touchdown by the Georgia defense also makes the difference. But I'm going to go with Georgia here. I think Georgia is a slightly better team. And also when it comes to these big games, I feel like Georgia definitely will be ready for them. And it's against Alabama. They're ranked number 4 in the AP poll. I think it will be a close game. It wouldn't really shock me, though, if Alabama pulled off the upset here. If Alabama wins this game, they definitely are in the driver's seat to make it to the SEC championship, and the SEC race will definitely be wide open for the rest of the way. So yeah, this is the biggest game of the weekend. College Game Day, of course, will be down here, but I got Georgia winning this one 28-24. And then finally, we got Illinois versus Penn State at 7:30 Eastern time on NBC. Penn State favored by 19. That's a really high spread there for a Big Ten conference game between two undefeated teams. You got Illinois that's coming off a win against Nebraska on the road, of course, this past Friday. This is a pretty solid Illinois team. I'm not saying they're a really good team or a great team. They're just a solid team. Yes, they pulled off a big upset last week, but can they pull off the upset here against Penn State? Penn State, we don't really know much about them just yet. This will be their fourth, game of the season. So after this game, we'll kind of, figure out how good this team is and see if they are a playoff contender. Now remember, Penn State in week number 2 struggled against Bowling Green, but they did bounce back against Kent State. So does Penn State have a little bit of momentum going into this game? I mean, it's kind of hard to tell, but they do have the home field advantage in this one. This will be a really tough test here for Illinois, but I actually wouldn't really be shocked here if Illinois actually is really competitive in this game. I don't think it will be enough, though. I think Penn State comes out really fired up. Plus, this game's at 7:30 Eastern time, and it's also a night game at one of the toughest places to play in all of college football and definitely in the Big Ten. I think Illinois struggles in this game on the offensive side of the football. And I think Penn State wins it 24-7. I don't think Illinois scores as much points as they did, of course, from this past weekend against Nebraska. This will definitely be a tougher defense that they'll go up against in the Nebraska game. So I got Penn State winning this one 24-7 over Illinois. So that is my official game picks and predictions heading into week number 5 of the 2024 college football season. Let me guys know what you think about these games and give me your game picks and predictions for these 10 games down in the comments below. Thanks for watching. watching this video, and stay tuned here for more sports content videos on my Lucas Ross Sports YouTube channel.